Welcome people coming in. It's almost 5:30. We'll give it a couple of minutes before we get going here. We'll let people keep rolling in. All right. Welcome, everybody coming in. Give it just another minute and then we'll get going on tonight's talk. Right, the numbers are stabilizing a little. All right. Well, welcome to tonight's Naturehood. We had a late in the game switch of subject. Our original speaker had a family emergency, and we want to be as supportive as possible of family balance and being there when you need to be. So thankfully, Jennifer DeGraff was able to come in and pitch hit and has a great topic for you all. Just a little bit of housekeeping up front. Feel free to chat amongst yourselves and to kind of start with your name and where you're located and talk to each other in the chat. We'll also be taking Q&A in the Q&A function and answering those hopefully at the end. So we're glad to see you all here. We also won't be doing the raise hand functions because with a couple hundred people, it's just a little too chaotic to have people speaking during it. But there's a lot of wisdom in the room if you chat to each other, or if you put them in the Q&A, we'll come back to it. I'm Anne-Marie Benz. I'm the Horticulture and Stewardship Programs Manager for CNPS's state office. And we've got Jennifer DeGraff with us, who has a history of trying to collect letters after her name. So landscape architect, educator, and a few other extra letters in there. So I'll let you take it from here, Jen.
Great, thanks. I like the alphabet. It's fun. Okay, so like Anne-Marie said, we made this change of the subject and the talk pretty last minute, and so this is not terribly in depth. It's fairly basic, but I think it covers some stuff that's come up in conversations that I've had with clients, other designers, students, stuff like that, where I think that there's not enough about this subject out there. And I'll point out some of those places where I think some of the information that you might find if you're Googling stuff, you're going to get some information that could be a little bit misleading. So I want to make sure that even though this is a basic overview, that I point out the occasional pitfall, and hopefully something in here will be helpful. So the premise of the talk is that we're trying to grow some stuff. We're going to be doing our gardening where we already have trees. That's the starting point for what I'm really kind of trying to get to. And so our goals are keeping that tree, because that's the premise, the idea. We want to grow some stuff, and we don't want to mess up the environmental services that tree and our garden at large could be providing. So that includes things like habitat, cleaning and treating water as it comes into our garden, from stormwater, preventing runoff, all that kind of thing, having clean air, having healthy soil, not sending stuff to the landfill, conserving energy and sequestering carbon. These are all environmental services that can happen in your garden. And we're not necessarily going to pick on all of those, but where something comes up that I want to mention, I will point it out. So what's the problem with growing stuff under trees? Why can't I just plant anything anywhere? The challenge is that there's an inherent conflict between us getting our way and putting whatever we want wherever we want it, and keeping that tree healthy and happy. So do we want to get our way, Or do we want to actually keep that tree and keep it healthy and happy so that it can live a nice long life? I had someone come up to me after a talk once, this is a few years ago, and this woman showed me a photo on her cell phone and said, what should I plant under this tree? And you could kind of make out from the image that what she was trying to plant out was really mature, very established, large statured, some kind of a conifer. And I was saying that she needed to find out, what kind of tree that is and work with the tree and all this stuff. And she's like, oh, it's been there 30 years. It's not a problem. I'm like, no, big problem. Because if she's going to change the conditions that tree is living in and start digging up stuff around its root zone, she's changing what's going on where that tree is, and she might make it upset enough that it starts declining. She could do some real damage. So just assuming, oh, this tree's mature, it's been here a while, that does not necessarily mean you can just do whatever and it's going to put up with that. So the reason that's a challenge is whatever that tree has now at its beck and call for water or nutrients, anything it gets from the soil, like oxygen and gas exchanges, somewhere to have its roots live. Those are all things that any other plant you bring in are going to compete with it for. They're going to be competing for similar, if not the same resources. And that tree could also be in conflict with the plants that you put in by dropping its leaves all over them. And that may be fine, depending on what you're doing. It may not be so great. So another thing is, if that tree has a tendency to inhibit the growth of other plants through allelopathy, I'm going to say that so wrong. Never mind, I'm not going to try. It could be a chemical thing. It could just be that it's covering little plants with too many leaves. Could be any reason that there's a conflict from the tree above hindering growth of plants below. And that can include shade, that it's just too shady under there, or that it might be deciduous. So part of the year it's super sunny and the light goes through the canopy, and part of the year it's really not. And that can be a problem for plants you're putting down below that tree. And so the reality of tree roots, and I felt validated just the other day when I heard another person say this, is when I was in school studying landscape architecture and learning about horticulture, I was taught that trees were kind of a mirror image of what's above ground to what's below ground. And then you can kind of mentally imagine the root zone. And we know now that is hogwash. It's so nice to hear other people say that they were taught the same hogwash I was taught, that the goal here isn't to just hold on to old ideas, it's to find out if those old ideas are still expected to stay true to that. Is that still what we think? Maybe it's not. And I find all the time that something I've learned in one place says something else in another place, and I have to figure out what's the real deal, what's going on, why am I getting different answers for the same or similar questions. And also, each of these plants, these trees that we're worried about here, they're very different. They're just as different as you or I and Anne-Marie or anybody else could be. They can be very different between species, very different between individuals of that species, especially if they're not cloned like from a nursery, but they're grown from seeds, or they're just naturally propagating. And they can be different on the conditions that they're grown in, the soil that they're growing in, the water that they're getting, the quality of the water that they're getting, and just about any other thing, anything having to do with where they are, because they don't get to say, I don't like this apartment, I'm going to go move to another one. They're stuck with where they're put unless we move them. And so those roots, like I said, they're not always where you might think they are. They could look more like this, where a tree would have really wide-reaching surface roots and feeder roots, and then as you get deeper, it's not a mirror image of what's above ground. And so those roots, we need to be thinking about where they could be and not where we wish they were. So they need gas to exchange from the soil and oxygen. They need water and nutrients, like I said before. They can be super wide reaching. They can also be connected to other plants and other trees through mycorrhizal fungi. And that's a whole thing that is super cool, but I can't get into it here too much. They do put down stuff into the soil and work with the soil as like a symbiotic relationship with the life that's in the soil. So that life in healthy soil is not just hanging out on its own, it's communicating with and interacting with your trees. And they rely on that soil food web to make nutrients and water and all the good stuff in that soil available for them to absorb and take up through the roots. And so let's take a step back and think about how trees die. Now, here's one of the challenges with trees dying is that they usually, if you have a mature tree and you do some hanky-panky under its canopy and dig holes in the soil where its roots are and do all these things, it could have started what we call the mortality spiral by introducing those stressors to that tree. The problem with this mortality spiral and with trees not liking what we do is that they don't show their displeasure super fast. It's not like if I make my cat mad, they're going to let me know right away. These guys can take years to really give you a demonstration that something went wrong somewhere along the line. And then years later, you notice and you go, oh, what happened? What just happened? Well, it didn't just happen, possibly. Could have happened years ago. It could have happened with a remodel or planting or changing an irrigation schedule to something that was less favorable to that tree. Could happen with construction you didn't even know about that happened years before. So I'm going to go through a little bit of what can impact that. Events like fires and storms, getting hit by a bus, obvious ways that we can see immediate change in a tree, but diseases and construction and just the age of a tree, they don't live forever. I wish some of them would, but all those little stressors can add up to the mortality spiral, which can start out, we're assuming we have a mature tree, and then things like air pollution and drought stress and maybe something in the soil starts to kind of stress it out a little bit. It's not unhealthy, but it's getting a little weak. Then construction injuries or a change in water, excessive pruning, all those kinds of things can kind of add salt to that wound and harm it further. Pests or other diseases can come in, and then you start noticing, oh, hey, my tree's in decline. And the next thing you know, it's just too late. And we sometimes, I know I've done this, I go, oh, this tree is declining, it's dying back. What do I do? And sometimes the best thing you can do is not do anything. Don't start changing the conditions. Don't start watering more or less, or panicking and trying to get it healthy again. It's better in my mind to find out what's wrong in the first place and see if that can be corrected and consider all these things that might have gone into that decline. So the next thing I want to know, really the first thing I want to know is what kind of tree am I growing under? I want to learn about that species in my area and what are its habits, what does it like, what does it dislike, assuming that things like sun and soil, location are all a good match, and I'm going to be planting other plants that match those needs, and everything is all matchy-matchy, everything seems like it should be cool, then I want to check on the water needs. And this is one of the places where us, especially in California, can get really tripped up. So WooCalls is one of my go-to places for looking up the water needs. I don't always do design projects or work in the same area that I live in. I have clients that might be to the west of me or north of me, and they could be far enough away that they're actually in a different region from me as far as WooCalls is concerned. And so I don't have time to really spend on how to use WooCalls. And they've recently updated it. So these screenshots are from August of 22. I think there's a more current, I think they may have changed things around a little bit. But if you find the WooCalls website, and I am absolutely happy to give that to Anne Marie, or you can also look the water needs up on CalScape. But if you're not, if you really want to get stuff that's more whittled down to specific regions of California, I would check WooCalls and CalScape against each other, do a little research if you're concerned, because WooCalls divided the state into 6 regions and then gave different evaluations for each region for each plant. So you see that little circle there that says plant search database. That's the meat of the WooCalls database. And they have such good information about how WooCalls is organized, what's in here, how they figure things out, what it is and what it isn't. And so, for example, WooCalls assumes that the plant is in full sun and well established already. So this is not about new plants. This is more about long-term water needs, not I just put it in the ground yesterday and it's July water needs, okay? So to use WooCalls, you'll find a place where you can search for your city, or if you can't find your city, pick one that's the most similar to yours. Often it'll just be the next city over and they just happen to skip. They don't have everybody in here. So you select a region or a city. It's got a big old pull down and it responds to you typing in, or you can search by plant, you can favorite things, you can download stuff and export to Excel. You can do all kinds of amazing stuff. And CalScape has much of the same functions that WooCalls is. I just didn't have screenshots handy. So what WooCalls is doing that nobody else does, no nursery, no wholesaler, no generic website, is they have taken the water needs and given them math. So if you're looking at a plant that they say for your location is low water needs, they're saying that that plant can thrive on 10 to 30% of your local evapotranspiration factor. Now, I know that for some of you, you're like, what? But I wish that I had time to go into this. And if we have time at the end with the questions, and you guys really want to know, I'll do my best. I could do a whole hour just on navigating this and CalScape and comparing the two and just like diving in and digging around. So the important thing here is to know that you don't want to mix plants between water use categories. So you don't want to put low and high in the same watering area. And it doesn't matter if you're really watering by hand or watering by irrigation. You shouldn't have a low and a high right next to them, because you're either going to overwater the low water needs plant or underwater the high water needs plant. And our goal is to water everybody the right amount. So if you get into this, it's pretty awesome. It's not perfect. I have an example of that. So I mentioned before the mycorrhizal fungi. They can connect plants and trees underground. It's a totally cool thing. I just wanted to make sure that I had this slide still in here. And sometimes I've even heard that a plant that's drought stressed in one part, if it's connected to others, it can possibly be served by others that have enough water to share. Like, I don't even know how that would work, but I think that is just way too cool. And also, if you see any links in any of these slides that you would like, I will provide them to CNPS so that they can get it to you, because there's a really cool Wikipedia thing there on mycorrhizal fungi. And I think that it's totally worth looking up. Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of, like, really only a few major groups of trees that are native to California, oaks being the first one. And I'm going to do something naughty. I'm going to generalize on the California oaks. It's something I don't like generalizing, but these have largely some of the same preferences. Because look at this list. There's all these native oaks in California. They have mostly similar needs, mostly similar preferences, but that doesn't mean that they're the same. So if you know which oak you've got, you should be looking up the information that you need for that species. But for the purpose of just the oaks, I'm going to generalize. So challenges under California native oaks is that they really, really hate it when you mess around in their root zone. They particularly hate it when their root zone is being watered and it's in the warmer months of the year. So late spring into, say, early fall. They do not like summer water. There's something about the life in the soil, the opportunity for pathogens, and their roots being particularly vulnerable when they're warm and wet. So that is something that I think is an absolute hands down. If you have a California native oak, look it up, make sure that I'm not misleading you on your species, because your species is different, but they do not like that. They do have a tendency to put down leaf litter that has a little bit of an allelopathic effect on plants that come in and want to grow under them. Not all plants are adversely affected by this, but there may be some plants that just aren't going to like it under there anyway. They have a tendency to have some fairly deep shade, and they're mostly evergreen. They can do a big leaf drop once a year, and then they re-leaf out right away. So I don't really consider them deciduous because they don't stay dormant for a while. They just kind of get rid of the old and put out the new and keep moving. Their leaf litter tends to make the soil slightly acidic, but their leaf litter is critical to that tree's survival. And that is because of the relationship between the tree and the life in the soil directly under the leaf litter. So if you have a tree, a native oak, and it's got this beautiful, wonderful leaf litter, you should leave that. Don't cover it up with a lot of mulch. Don't try to change it too much. The leaf litter is important to the survival of that plant. Do not tidy it and think, oh, well, look at all these leaves, I'm just going to make this nice and tidy, because they're really, really relying on that. So there we go. Oh, yeah, okay. Their mortality spiral tends to be around things like change under their root zone and those infections and their vulnerability to pathogens, like I said. Injury can be from construction. Maybe you wanted to build a retaining wall. Can be from pruning. You could cut in root pruning, or in cutting a branch, you might introduce something through dirty cutting blades. And you can clean those, but from digging holes. I even read somewhere where someone proposed that pulling up a lot of weeds under these guys, which I don't usually see too many weeds under there, but if you're being really fastidious and you're pulling up a lot of weeds, that can also churn up the soil a lot. Gophers can be super destructive because they're under there churning up the root zone. They can be very competitive with, or rather not competitive enough against non-native grasses or other invasive plants. They hate summer irrigation, and they do not appreciate it if you change the grade or the soil level under their canopy and over their roots. So if you're thinking, oh, look, I want to make it more flat over here or more steep over here, that would be a big, big change for them. So oak turnoffs, like I mentioned, would be installing plants that have different needs than they do, like more water than they want, or adding fertilizer that they're not adapted for. Turf grass is right out. I've had people argue with me that their oaks are fine with the turf. My question is, for how long? I would leave the leaves. Short-term planting like annuals and bedding plants, if you really, really want something like that, I would suggest not digging them in. Maybe it's something you can seed over and it's just an ephemeral, or it just comes up for a little bit and then goes away. But I wouldn't change your irrigation in that area. Maybe it's something that you just do over winter. Hard pruning is hard. And I've also heard this one that people wonder if you can just train them to like different conditions. And the answer is no. An oak is an oak is an oak. I mean, just like these guys, they're not going to just put up with bad conditions or conditions that they're not made for just because they started out young and they've had that for a while. I think that's a time bomb. So things that they like is the plants that are natural to their natural environment. Leaving the leaves, not tilling, not letting your dog go to the bathroom on it, not disturbing the soil, no sudden changes. They're very slow moving. You can, if we have like a super hot, dry summer that's unusual for its dryness, and we didn't get the rains that we were hoping for, and it's dusty, or there's been fires, I don't think there's anything wrong with washing the leaves off once or twice if you've got a lot of that going on, and giving them a little pick-me-up, a little cleansing. But I wouldn't give them extra summer water because of all the reasons we've been talking about. But if you feel that for the winter and the winter rains that they should have gotten, that didn't happen, or that those winter rains started way too late, you might get away with extending the season and watering a little bit more in the winter, or as things are coming up in the spring, or maybe starting with a little irrigation as we're going into fall and winter to kind of supplement their natural rain, the rainfall that we would hope they would naturally get. But I wouldn't go and say, oh, it was a lean winter, so I'm going to water them in, May, June, July, August, that kind of thing. So here's where I think Googling this, especially with California native oaks, can get us in trouble. And that's that there are so many articles about what to plant under the oaks, because the nurseries and everybody knows that we have these beautiful trees. They know we want to garden. They know we want to do all this fabulous stuff. But I would suggest, and I looked at a couple of articles and pulled out this little list of plants from those articles, and these plant factors, that L to M is low to moderate for the yarrow, and the Arctostaphylos also, according to WUCALS for my area, low to moderate. Well, I shouldn't be watering a moderate water use plant under a plant that does not want water in the summer at all, because that moderate water use plant, and even some of these low water use plants, they're going to need some water all through that summer, and they're going to be in conflict with that oak. And if I give them enough water and they're using the same root zone as that oak is, I'm going to be doing my oak a disservice just to try to keep these little shrubs and perennials alive. So my challenge with these, planting under oaks articles is that when you actually look up the water needs for these plants, they're totally incompatible. I don't know what they're doing, but I would be very careful about that and check what's naturally under your oak, that oak species, what grows there in nature and out in the wild, and try to mimic that and that watering regime as much as you can if you really want to keep that tree happy. Okay, so plants with oaks, I think that no summer water and shade tolerant is probably your best bet. This right here in the picture, Salvia clevelandii on the top upper right, but the last name really wants full sun, but maybe the direction of your sun is going to be fine. And it's going to get enough sun. And it's not directly under the canopy, so it's not going to get shaded out. It loves no summer water. So if you can place it around the area where your oaks are, this could be a good plant, because it really doesn't like being watered in the summer either. And so that could be good, but your challenge there is going to be giving it enough sun. And daffodils and things like that, they do great because they go summer dormant. They come up when the rains are here, they do their leafing thing, their flowering thing, and then they just go away. You don't worry about it. Stuff like Salvia spathaceae, the bottom right corner, it probably wants a little bit more water than this oak does, but I've seen them in oak areas, and they probably, because I don't always go back when I see it, I go, oh, look, there it is. I don't always go back to see what it looks like 2 months later when it's hot and dry. They may just kind of look a little sad for a while and then perk up when the rains come again. I think they need a little bit more water in the summer than the oaks do to look really good. So some final thoughts on the oaks. We need to work with them. They're not gonna just put up with us. And they're also not necessarily going to tell us right off the bat what's troubling them. And they're susceptible to Phytophthora. And so that is a whole big problem. It's everywhere. And you should, if you're concerned about that, there's all kinds of things you can do, like the pear test to find out, or sending some samples away to a soil lab or something. Best practice is just let an oak be an oak. Don't mess around under its drip line at a minimum if you can possibly avoid it. If you must disturb, do it with the least invasive way, like I said, seeding, or just pocketing in some bulbs or something, or planting nearby but not under the canopy. Do as little as possible. I'm not saying that if you put a plant under an oak, it's going to just up and croak, but you're introducing vulnerability. And it's kind of like if you're stressed out all the time and then as soon as the pressure is off, you get sick. It might be something like that. Okay, so pines, California pines. Talk about diversity. These guys are all over the map. They want to be on the coastal cliffs. They want to be in the deserts. They want to be up in the mountains. They're from everywhere in California. So I'm going to focus my efforts on the Monterey pine, and because I can't do all that. And I am not a pine expert, but with pines in general, they can make a lot of shade. They can drop a lot of needles. They're susceptible to some pests like pine bark beetle, which is it's native to California and it's part of our ecosystem. But when the pines are stressed out, the beetles go hog wild and they get out of whack. And that's when that becomes a problem. Some of the pines are a lot more garden tolerant than those California native oaks, but they do have their specific needs, and they have very different needs. So you really do need to identify what kind of a pine you have or that you want to grow. Huge variability. So this is why I'm focusing on the Monterey pine. It's a popular nursery plant, but it relies very heavily on some specific organism in the soil. There's something in the soil where it comes from that it relies on. So it can grow to 70 feet and live 150 years unless you're trying to grow it outside of its native range. So it needs that fog belt to get the moisture that it wants. If you bring it into the interior of California, where I understand it is sold at nurseries, you will only get a few years out of it. You're not going to get 150 years out of this tree growing it where the life in the soil that it's reliant on just doesn't live. That life in the soil is specific to where it comes from. They're very, very tolerant of wind. They hate air pollution. They love a nice, well-draining soil, which would suggest that they like drier conditions. But thanks to that fog belt and what it takes to grow them in a garden, WUCALS considers them a moderate water use plant. So that's one of those places where a little research would do you a world of good. And you might want to check a couple different resources, check some stuff from any native plant nursery that's local to you and see what they say before you try growing this fabulous tree. So under those guys, considering that WUCALS thinks they're a moderate water use plant, but they like to grow out on the cliffs and in the fog belt, some of these plants might grow well under them if they're getting enough water, and if these plants are also going to have what they need to grow near your Monterey pine. So some of these are lower water needs technically, but some of them may put up with a little extra water, and you might be able to find kind of a middle ground where the tree gets what it needs, and you also can grow other plants that don't necessarily need that much, but they'll be patient with you. Okay, redwoods. I know this is Anne Marie's favorite. Redwoods are completely different from the California native oak, and in any of them, completely different. I have seen people try to grow them together, and they are totally incompatible. The California native redwoods are a high water use plant. The California native oaks are a no summer water, effectively low to very low water plant. So we shouldn't be growing these guys together ever. And another thing I want to say about these before I get into whatever's written on my slide is that I see them grown in places like along the freeway near me, where Northern California is a place California native redwoods grow, but next to a freeway or in an urban environment where it's hotter and drier and there's all that reflected heat and light and all that stuff, and it's not what they want. They want to be in the fog belt like the Monterey pine. So even though they're from up here and from lots of places in California, it doesn't necessarily mean we can just put them in any conditions we want and that everybody's going to be cool with that. So they are a single species situation. There is only the one redwood, the coast redwood. That's the only redwood. They're often confused with giant sequoias. And if you want this article from the National Park Service, I'll be more than happy to send it to Anne Marie so she can make it available. Redwoods are insanely hoggy piggy, competitive little things. Their roots can travel. They're incredibly fibrous, very strong, and they can go under pavement and then pop up somewhere else. They're super, super eager little beavers. They drop a lot of leaf litter. They can make the soil somewhat acidic, although I think it's not too bad, mostly because you shouldn't let the leaf litter build up more than a couple of inches. They love water. They depend heavily on fog drip to provide themselves their own water, where the fog gets literally combed by their foliage, and then you can stand underneath one and it'll be like it's raining. They're very shallow rooted, and they don't like it if they're not near the fog, or if they're in a condition where the fog doesn't hang out, like next to a freeway where it's just too warm and it burns off before it has a chance to drip. They are a major provider of habitat for things like hummingbirds, which is totally wild. Hummingbirds love eating little baby spiders that hatch out of redwoods. And I've watched them do this. I've watched them flit around in the redwood canopy, nipping up tiny little baby spiders right out of the air. It's totally awesome. Some people say that because they're high water use and California is constantly struggling with drought, that maybe we shouldn't use them anymore. But they're an important part of California. They're an important part of our ecosystem. And I don't think that we should just say, oh, that's it, high water use, we're done. I think that we should consider when and where is appropriate to use them and encourage that. They are susceptible to a number of diseases, which I'm just not going to get into. They love rich soil, so top dressing any new plantings with compost and wood chips. Make sure that they get some nice consistent moisture to get established, that they get enough irrigation, and that you're not picking plants that don't like slightly acidic soil. You want plants that can thrive in that heavily shaded or at least filtered light, because these guys are evergreen and they're not going to drop their leaves once or seasonally. They're going to keep them dropping all the time and just keep replenishing all year round. And they do like well-drained soil, but I think they'll put up with a little bit more than some other things. So plants that go under redwoods, if you're watering your redwood because it loves high water, then I think that most of these would also put up with that. I've seen the oxalis oregana growing in redwood groves. There's ferns, there's all kinds of fabulous stuff. And this last entry down here I got from WooCalls, where they say Iris Douglasiana is a low water use plant. I disagree. I did some research on Calscape and checking out like the precipitation in different areas. I think Iris Douglasiana is actually a moderate water use plant. So even WooCalls, I think sometimes isn't a perfect system, but it's a great place to start. And Calscape, of course, is always a good place to go. And with that, I think we have time for questions. Anne Marie.
We do, and we've got a lot of them, and we've got quite a few coming from different all over different areas. The first one, though, we got this afternoon was a question on when we see in natural areas or renatural areas, parks, things like that, a lot of the understory taken out. What are we seeing happen there? Is this something to be concerned about? And I know where I normally live in the Redwoods, we have people who really clear their understory and it looks very park-like, whereas by comparison, the land that I'm lucky enough to be on often has a lot of understory.
Yeah, so it makes me sad. My belief, I don't have, verification. I don't know where, what the person with the question is seeing or where or anything. My belief is that that is probably people mitigating fire risk and fire ladders and trying to prevent a ground fire from getting into the canopy of the trees. And here's the thing, that trashes a lot of habitat, and it destroys some of the places that our birds and ground dwelling creatures and bugs live, and the things that they live on and the things that they depend on. And I don't think that it's necessary, but I do understand, like near me, East Bay Regional Parks District in Northern California, they do some thinning and clearing, but they don't clear cut all of the ground plane stuff. I think if anywhere we can encourage good habitat and keep the plants that are in the understory of these trees, especially if they're not invasives, right? If we can't do it in the parks, where can we? Because I understand being a little bit more concerned around homes and within neighborhoods. But if you're out in a regional park or if you're out in an open space and someone's home or apartment building isn't at risk from that space, my bet is to say, let's preserve some habitat. Let's encourage that, because the environment is all of these things. You cannot just divorce them and expect it to still hold together. So that I hope that helps.
We've got a variety of questions. We're going to run through them while we have time, and we'll try and answer what we can. There's also a lot of knowledge in the room here, the virtual room. So if you have ideas on these topics, put them in the chat, answer them in there as well, because there are a lot of people who've worked with trees there.
Good.
Yeah, as well. So first one, the person has a mint invasion that they inherited from a previous owner under a tree that they'd like to save. And they're seeking advice on how to dig out the mint without killing the tree.
Oh, so hard. I've done that. Okay, I'm gonna give you my best answer. I haven't like tested this in science or anything. I'm gonna say persistence. If you remove all the shoots, if you go out there, and I don't know what kind of tree you're trying to protect or anything like that, but if you go out and you are more persistent than the mint, you should win. The challenge with that is that they're going to grow back so fast. So you've got to be on it and deprive them of the sunlight to their leaves, which helps them continue to do this and continue to grow and make more mint. If you do this consistently and you don't let them grow leaves and you keep tearing it up and depriving them, they will eventually run out of steam, and then you might gain the upper hand and be able to really eradicate it. I'm basically repeating some advice I heard for Bermuda grass, but you cannot let them come back without you ripping that right off.
And it works the same with ivy and a couple of other really aggressive ones that are out there.
Bought that.
I bought a house one time where the backyard was just ivy wrapping its way around everything, and it was just being way more stubborn than the ivy. And
I had to grub it out for a client, and it was a nightmare.
all right, next one. Would checking CalScape for companion plants for your trees and getting ones that you can start from seed be a good idea?
Absolutely. Absolutely. CalScape does a terrific job of sharing other plants that plant might grow with, and also wildlife that it might be supporting, and just all kinds of stuff. So absolutely.
And CalScape is going to be being updated soon in the next few months, depending on the day. So keep an eye out for it. Let's see, if you have an old tree that is not appropriate to the area, how do you find out its needs?
How do you find out what?
If you have an older tree that, you inherit an older tree, but it's not a native to that particular area, how do you find out what it needs?
Identify it. Identify it and look it up. I'm assuming because it's not appropriate that it's either not a California native, or it's not native to your area, or it could be, God, it could be anything. So I would say identify it. And Anne Marie, what is that app that you like?
Seek or iNaturalist will help you to identify most plants pretty well. It'll give you a good direction. It's also a lot of fun to engage with other people being naturalists. Yeah, and
I will sometimes take a photo of something I don't recognize and do a Google image search. So if you look at the Google search bar, you'll see a little tiny camera icon off to the right. Click that and, go crazy. It's pretty easy to use. I don't have specific instructions, but you can show it a picture and it'll try to figure it out or find other stuff that looks like that. And I've done that a couple of times for a whole lot of random things. So
yeah, iNaturalist has a lot of really good engaging pieces. Seek is really fun to use. There's a couple of other great ones out there.
Yeah.
Can ground squirrel overpopulation adversely affect oak roots?
I would say so. Absolutely. Yeah, because they're gonna be digging stuff up. They're gonna be burying their little treasures and yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that they're fine if they're native to the area and in balance with everything. But if they're not in balance, if they're going bonkers and reproducing, or if that area is also under other stressors, like nearby construction or air pollution and irrigation or whatever, then they could be an additional stressor and continue it down the mortality spiral more than it would without them.
We've got somebody asking about watering leaves if they have a drippy oak.
Watering leaves if it's a what?
Drippy oak.
A
Can I ask about watering the leaves if you have a drippy oak? I don't quite know that one.
I don't know what that is. I
But we'll go-
will say on watering leaves for not everything wants its leaves wet, but I will say plants can be somewhat rehydrated in a stress event if it's like super hot out and you've got something that's wilting. Some plants can take water up through the surface of the leaves, and you can kind of mitigate that drought stress just a little bit, right? Because obviously it's going to evaporate right back off the surface, but you also halt any more water leaving that plant while it's drying off of the surface, and keeping those leaves clean. If, like I said, if there's an excess of pollution, you live near the freeway, or there's been fires near you or whatever, it can be very helpful to the plant to have that stuff rinsed off, all that, whatever that is. So I don't know what that oak is that you're talking about. But I would say as long as you're not like doing it every week or every day, just giving somebody a little shower every once in a while, especially if you've got extenuating circumstances, could be helpful.
Okay. Do oaks in fog drip areas have more death or disease because they're getting that summer water? Like in Redwood Regional Park, they're getting summer, we get that fog that comes in and drips over everything.
Yep. And then yeah, it's damp for a plant that doesn't appreciate damp. Yeah.
What about growing or adding a young oak, knowing that you may not see it fully mature? How do you plan a design for it?
Oh, God, what a good question. I would plan and design so that it looks fabulous all by itself, doing its thing and living its best life. And I would plan so that the space under it doesn't get over compacted. Because one thing I think we've all seen is everybody wants to be under the tree. You see, like at construction sites, the trucks, they're always trying to park their trucks under some mature tree because it's shady. And I want to be like the fist shaking Karen, and go yell at people.
Seen you do it. So,
So I would make it so that the places to hang out, the places to sit, the places where paths go, don't encourage people walking on that earth and compacting it over time. That's the other design thing I would say is make sure that it's a beautiful showcase all by itself, like a modern art museum. It's not cluttered. It's not, the contemporary is beautiful. Modern design is fabulous. And this can be a showpiece for that. As long as it just doesn't get stomped and have its soil health degraded over time. Or find a way to protect that soil from compaction, but also let it keep its leaves. That I think would be challenging.
how worried should we be about an oak with lots of mistletoe?
I don't know. I've heard that mistletoe is parasitic, but I don't know how damaging it is. So that is an excellent question for an arborist, honestly.
What about removing non-native species on a slope like Algerian ivy that is under some coast live oaks, is it okay to remove the ivy a little time if it's under the drip line?
I'm gonna say yes. I would do it where you're doing the least amount of disturbance in the summer when they're vulnerable. So I would, have you noticed when you walk across a lawn or like a sports field and it's the middle of the summer, but it's not, like right after it got wet, that turf grass can feel pretty firm underfoot. But if you walk on the same turf after a heavy rain, it's squishy. That squishiness is that soil being a little bit softer when it's wet. So soils when they're wet are more vulnerable to compaction than when they're dry. And so I would say if you have to grub something out, the soil will be looser and more friable when it's wet. And also the oak being a little bit less vulnerable when it's wet in the winter season or when the natural wet season. You might have the best of both worlds where the oak is a little bit less vulnerable and the soil is a little bit looser and easier to navigate without pulling up big chunks that stick together and making a big hash of it.
Yeah, and if it's any parasites or parasitic things that are going to choke out the trees eventually, got to get rid of.
Yeah, and you don't necessarily have, it's for some plants. I don't know that one in particular because I've only fought the regular ivy. But for some plants, if you cut them far enough, they won't come back. Other plants will come back straight from the roots and defy you. But you might Google that, use the words stump sprout and see if you can't gain some traction on how far back do you have to cut it, or do you actually have to grub it out of the soil?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you and I are both in Northern California now, but came out of Southern California. So this is a Southern California question. Southern California, walnut woodland. Recommendations on understories.
Walnut woodland.
Do you know anything on that one?
I can make a guess. I'm going to guess that there's something very specific about the leaf litter. So yeah, I would try. Are those native down there?
I don't know that they're native, but
Yeah.
it was such an unusual woodland.
Yeah.
I don't know. There might be parts where they are. They weren't where I grew up in Southern California, but I also left there fairly young, and I don't know all the areas down there.
And I know
Somebody in the chat says yes, that they are.
okay.
So
Very cool.
absolutely, black walnuts are native. That's great to know.
I would
As way up in the mountains, and they're a protected species in LA County. Well, there are a bunch of people who know about them. Perhaps they know as well. What's a great understory?
Oh yeah, no, I know that they grow in Glendale. Ha, son of a gun. I would do that workflow that I kind of walked through. I would check woo calls, I would check Calscape, obvious first go-tos. And then I would start checking things like theater pane and looking for other resources that are more local to you that can help you get kind of drill down on the needs and then work with its needs once you learn what they are. Yeah, I'm not an expert on walnuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Here's one that I understand a little bit more just because of where I am. Does shooting water up into a redwood help it during the summer?
Well, what, machine water? Oh, you mean like laundry water?
Shooting water, putting water, like spray,
Oh,
I would assume.
I bet they'd love that.
Well, redwoods take in water in two different ways. They need as much water coming in from the fog and from the tops as they do in their roots. So wetting their trunk is actually not what's taking in the water.
No.
Their trunk is their stem. So they need water in their roots and they need water in their tops.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's really important for redwoods, whenever possible, to be in the areas that they grow naturally, unless they have somebody who will tend them like the wonderful, precious babies that they are. Like if you go to Tree of Life Nursery, there are some amazing redwoods there.
Yes.
So they really they need that moisture.
I think, Anne Marie, your point about trunks goes for pretty much any tree. They're not, the trunk is meant to stay dry. And then as that trunk goes into the soil and turns into roots, the tissue changes to being a root tissue that will absorb water. Then the trunk itself is not meant to be a source of water uptake or any of that sort of thing. It's protective. It's not meant to take up anything. And then leaves can take up a little bit of water, and sometimes you can give them, if you absolutely have to fertilize something and it's for some reason, then some plants respond really well to foliar feeding. So I would Google those terms, foliar for the leaf and feeding. It's not something that I do because I tend to keep my soil healthy, so my soil keeps my plants healthy. But I know that some people will find that they just, for whatever reason, have a need to foliar feed. And that's really only for the leaf. It's not for any other part.
We're at time, so I want to just run through a couple things that are in the piece here. Somebody is recommending Secrets of the Oak Woodland by Kate Marion Child as a really good book, and she talks about mistletoe in that. So a resource for people who want that. And we're just over time, so I'm afraid we didn't get to all the questions because they kept rolling as we were talking. There is an email that'll go out afterwards that'll have a recording of this webinar link. The webinars are all on the CNPS YouTube channel. You can watch them, you can go back, you can check resources. We'll put as many resources as possible in that follow-up email. And if you have other questions, you can reach me through my email, abenz@cnps.org. So we will hopefully see you next month. Thank you, Jen. Thanks for coming in and pitch hitting at the last minute. It's huge. We appreciate it.
I'm glad to do it. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Thanks. Bye.